You're listening to Bigfoot Society, and I'm Jeremiah Byron. Tonight's account is from a retired detective who has come face to face with an interesting area in the Adirondacks of New York. Bigfoot activity and so much more. You'll not want to miss this episode, so stay with us. All right, Bigfoot Society, I've got the privilege of talking to Dave today. Dave is an individual that has an interesting background. He's from the southern Vermont and eastern New York area, and he's been a lifelong hunter and outdoorsman. Also has a background of being a retired police officer where he was a detective for many years. So welcome to the show, Dave. How's it going, man?
I'm doing good.
Absolutely. We were talking a little bit before we started recording that it's pretty rare to be able to get individuals talking about Vermont on the show. So really glad to have you on the show today and just to hear some different things about what you've experienced and what you've heard. You know, I'm going to go ahead and pass things over to you, Dave, and feel free to, take us back to the first account that you'd like to share and what exactly happened that day.
Okay, sounds good. The first one is on the Vermont side. It's probably in the late 80s, reflecting back probably 87, 88. And there's an area in southern Vermont, the people that listen, called the Bennington Triangle, more specifically Glastenbury Mountain. So at the time, that time back in the late 80s, my brother and I had decided to go hiking, and basically there's a fire tower on top of Glastenbury, and we were looking to do the shortcut via the snowmobile trails to get to the top versus the long, I think it's 12, 13 miles if you come in from either the north or the south. And so we were going to do this just as a quick overnight, and we had gone up there for the most part following a log road. Then we were trying to do the cross-country method, and it was getting a little bit later, and we didn't have a whole lot of gear with us. It was summertime, so we basically had some rope, tarp, or a piece of plastic. I think my brother had a military poncho or something like that. And it also looked like it was going to be storming here shortly. So we had to quick something to eat, set up our camp, and probably an hour or so later, it did start raining, thunderstorm, and we just basically called it a night. Through the night, after it rains, it's very quiet. The ground's wet, obviously. I was woken up and by something stirring around in our little camp area. The other thing is we had to hike quite a ways and around to find a flat spot big enough for two of our little tent type things. And so we didn't have a lot of room between them. I would say no more than 6 feet. And whatever was moving around was moving kind of around the circumference of the campsite. And then at one point it was actually between the two tents. And laying on the ground, I could actually feel the impact of when the foot hit the ground. I could just feel it in my body. And at the time, I just remember thinking, what is that? And nothing else happened after that. Listened to that, and eventually it just kind of went away. And so in the morning when my brother and I were talking about it, I said, did you hear that too? And he said, yes. And we did a quick little recon of the area to see if we could see tracks or anything like that. And there was nothing. The only odd thing that we did find was like the stone post of a house or a cabin at some point that was maybe 75 yards away. But nothing, no tracks, anything like that. And I've hunted my whole life since very young. There's basically three animals: deer, moose, and a bear that are on the large side. I've hunted moose in Alaska, so they will walk through a camp. But this just didn't sound like a moose. A bear is very quiet. And a deer, certainly with a human scent, is not going to go anywhere near that. Glastenbury is quite tall for a mountain in the Northeast. It's a little over 3,700 feet. And I would say we were probably 2/3 the way up, somewhere on there on one of those little shelves. At the time, back then, Bigfoot was a thing, but not really on the front pages of everything, not common. And I never put that together. We just wrote it off and moved on and didn't really think too much about it. That's kind of my Vermont side of things.
That is very interesting, Dave. And it's an area where, you mentioned the Bennington Triangle, and there's so many weird things that happen in that area. Probably listeners are aware. I know Small Town Monsters is coming out with a documentary soon on it. But you've got missing people, you've got Bigfoot reports, you've got all sorts of really weird stuff. Were you then, at that time in your life, were you interested in Bigfoot or aware of it, or what was your relation to the topic at that time?
At that time, I was certainly aware. I think when I was probably a teenager, we went and saw, I may butcher the name, but the Legend of Boggy Creek. I was aware of the Patterson Gimlin pictures, but I think there was some TV shows that might have had some Bigfoot stuff too, but it certainly wasn't on my radar.
Gotcha. So stormy, rainy. Were there any weird smells out of the ordinary during that time?
Thinking back to it, the only thing, it's going to sound weird, but like stale air, like the air was just still and stale, like a very humid room, walking into a humid room.
Gotcha. And it wasn't like I'm just trying to think of the last storm I went through out in the Midwest, not like an ozone type, when there's lightning strikes and you smell that ozone, nothing like that.
No.
Okay.
No. We were, that area kind of is on the eastern edge of the Hudson River Valley. So you can see quite a ways out through, depending on what other mountains might be in your way. But so we could see the storm in the valley, and as it came, but I don't recall any lightning anywhere near us. But we could see some.
Oh, I'm definitely sure. It's such a beautiful area. When you were looking around for tracks the next day, did you notice any? Let's say maybe any broken branches or anything that would have shown that something large would have been walking through the area off the trees?
No. And no moose tracks, since that time, I've kind of reflected back. And like I said, I've hunted Alaska with moose, and I know what I'm looking for, is whether it's a cow or a bull, they'll just charge right through and they'll break stuff as they go along. So, but there was nothing, and we didn't even see any kind of tracks. If it was a moose, you would have seen the impression in the ground, and we saw nothing.
Was there any, did this affect you emotionally in any way after, or is it maybe just a thing where you're just like, well, that was kind of odd hearing footprints and not seeing anything after?
At that point in time, yeah, that's really what it was. It's like, well, that was weird, and I can't really explain it, but okay. And, since learning more about that area as the years progress, you can make an argument that it was definitely a weird experience. And I don't have answers for it.
Absolutely. And what you just said is kind of similar to what I'm about to ask, and after this time, it sounds like then you became a police officer, a detective specifically. And so you're constantly looking at into things. Did you at any point look back at this time and say, oh, there's something else that happened close to this area that was reported regarding Bigfoot or something else? Any connections like that?
The only thing, a guy I knew, one day, we were just literally talking, and we were talking about weird things up on the mountain. And this would have been well into the 2000s. And he said, yeah, I was riding my ATV up there, and I saw this, and it was a flip phone, and it was a picture off a flip phone. And he's like, what is this? And I looked at it, and I'm like, well, I don't know, but it's big, and it's brown, and it looks like a gorilla. And I tried getting that picture from him, but he's since passed, and it's gone to wherever now. But, and I told him about the experience with something walking through our camp. And, it would have had to have been something very good on its feet, because these tents weren't very far apart. We're only talking a foot or two between the two tents. And to walk between them without knocking things over is tough.
Almost like it was able to walk in a straight line. It would have to.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. And I love hearing stories like that where it's like you saw something on a flip phone, because, in that time you didn't have to worry about AI photos or anything like that. It's just it was a different time when it comes to Bigfoot photos. Even though stuff could be faked, I think you had a less of a chance of it. So that's so it looked very similar to a gorilla, you were saying, things you've seen before.
Well, the picture, the color was like that of a lion, that tan brown color. And it was very muscular on its front half, and it was the front half was taller. It was like a gorilla stance almost. And, the back was at an angle. It was definitely down on all fours. And again, I don't know of any animals that are up there. The state of Vermont probably has mountain lions up there, and that's what it could have been, a rather large mountain lion. They'll deny that they're there, but they're there. Because the quality of the picture wasn't that great, but it clearly was a large animal.
Wow. So it was definitely, it was a front view of whatever was in that photo then?
Yeah.
Okay. Gotcha. Any and I know you said it was low detail, but were you able to see the head or the face at all?
And again, it looked just like a gorilla's face. It was, if I was looking at the picture, it was a side profile shot looking to the right. And the animal or whatever it was looking right straight up, like completely to the right of the screen. So I had a good profile shot. It's hard to judge size or judge distance based on that picture, but 40 to 50 yards maybe. And, it had that, I hate to sound like everybody else, but that cone head shape with the extended jaw.
Right.
And that's really what it looked like.
That's wild. That is absolutely wild.
The thing that impressed me was just the muscular of the shoulders, and like the arms seemed to be very muscular.
Since that time, Have you ever seen any other piece of media that comes close to what you saw in that photo?
I have not. Having come from that area, there's always stories and stuff. There was a story of one supposedly crossing Route 7. Somebody supposedly admitted to that, dressing up in a suit and crossing. I don't know.
Gotcha. So you're saying there's, over the years, you've heard other reports from this Bennington Triangle area, southern Vermont as well. Did you ever get any calls or anything when you were an active police officer or detective that you're like, oh, well, that might be connected to Bigfoot?
Not really. We did have a couple people get lost up in there, because our area would have covered that. And fortunately, everybody that was lost for just a short period of time, and we were able to get them out. With the agencies that were involved. So nobody, when I was active, there was nobody that was lost and never found.
That's good. I mean, that's the best. That's the thing you want to hear, is that the people that were lost were able to be found. I mean, so often the story is different than that. I mean, especially if you get out in places like the Pacific Northwest. But after you had this just odd experience, how did this affect the rest of your life when it comes to Bigfoot?
I would say that as Bigfoot became more of a thing and more socially accepted, I had thought back to that and said, maybe, because I don't have an answer as to what went through there. And the biggest thing is I'm more open to the idea now. That area is not too far from Whitehall, which is supposedly one of the hot spots in the Northeast. So I look at it as, that's very probable that there was something there. And the other thing is, I'm kind of a stats kind of person in statistical probability and different things, but Vermont is very forested. There's a lot of mountains, a lot of forests where something could, in fact, travel very easily from north to south with no problem not be seen.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of people don't realize how wild it can get in that area of the Northeast. So I definitely agree with you on that, Dave.
There's a reservoir on the backside of Glastenbury that we used to go fishing at. And, it's a 14-mile ride just to get to the reservoir of just a dirt road. So it's very vast up in there, and people just don't realize you can get turned around pretty easily.
Absolutely. We took a trip over there when I had visited New England a month or so ago, and it's just crazy. Once you drive into Green Mountain National Forest, you can just go and go and go, and it is a very daunting area for the Northeast. I would say it's very easy for something to hide out in there and for people not to see it. I did notice a lot of prior campsites in that area had been shut down for different reasons, so that was interesting as well. But Dave, you said that you also have another interesting experience to share about an area kind of close by, but maybe a little further.
Yeah. So my friend has a hunting camp, and it's in basically the center of the Adirondack Mountains. And that's what it's used for, is a hunting area. It's a small cabin on some leased logging land, and he's had it for about 5 years ago, or 5 years now. And the first couple of years, we're just kind of learning the lay of the land. There would be myself, him, and another guy that would go up there primarily. And there's some others that go later, but I've not yet met them. So he relates this story to me. I wasn't there. I got there about a week later. I live in South Carolina, so it's a pretty good hike for me to get from there to New York now, or Vermont. But I do make it up there a couple times a year. And so a couple of years ago, he and a friend, the other guy that's in the camp, it was opening weekend of deer season, I believe, so late October. And they were just up there. It might have been the weekend before opening weekend. I'm not 100% sure, but it was the end of October. And they were up there, and they'd had a few beers, and they're sharing war stories and what have you. And about midnight, they decided to call it a night and go to bed. So I'll give you the layout of the camp first. It's on a hill that it slopes to the back. And on the back of the camp, there's a door, but there's no steps or anything yet. It just opens up, and it's probably a 7-foot drop, maybe 8-foot drop, if you were to walk out there. Windows on either side. The bedrooms are more to the back corner and along the wall. So it's one room. So that's where the beds are. And in the other room, there's a wood stove and like a camp sink and a little stove and that sort of stuff. And the front door has a twist lock and a deadbolt. And the deadbolt is a pain in the neck to get open. You really have to pull on the door to get it to lock. It's just difficult. So on that particular night, they go to bed, and about an hour later, my friend, he tells me he wakes up, he's standing outside. He's got his shorts on, his T-shirt, and he's standing there in his socks. And he's kind of dazed a little bit and starts yelling. And for the other guy, I forgot to add that they started the wood stove. It's just good to warms up the camp a little bit, but it had gotten hot in there. So they had cracked the windows, which have some screens on them. And so anyway, he's outside yelling for the other guy, and he ultimately opens up the front door and goes up there. And my friend was standing there in his socks, and again, a little bit confused as to how he got there. His socks weren't muddy. If he had walked through the front door, he would have had a very difficult time, and he would have needed his keys to lock the door. The guy that came back out, his friend or our friend, said the door was still locked. The deadbolt was still locked when he went to get the owner. And anyway, they're a little rattled by this, and they go back inside, and they're looking, and none of the flashlights in the camp worked. His light that he keeps primarily wasn't working. And there's always a couple headlamps hanging up, in case somebody gets a deer or something, needs an extra one. None of those were working. And after a while, they finally drift off and go to sleep. He thought it was around 4 o'clock. So in the morning, they get up and they're kind of looking around the outside of the camp. So on that, let's see, it would have been the southern wall. There's a window, and that screen door, or the screen had been opened the window had been open, but the screen was pulled off the upper left corner from the top down. That's fairly tall. We measured it, and it's between 11 and 12 feet for something to reach up there and pull that screen down. The interesting thing is he said that they saw a handprint on the screen the size of a basketball. He has no idea how he got outside, no recollection of how he got outside. I've asked him, how many beers did you have? And he said, we had like 2. So, and again, we're good at busting each other's chops. So I said, are you guys pulling my leg? And they're like, no. And my friend's over 6 foot. There is no way that he fit through that little hole. Like if he was trying to play a prank on the other guy and get through that hole, there is just absolutely no way. And he has bad knees from the Army. So had he jumped out of there, he would have been in a pile outside and not been able to get up. My friend was actually a little rattled by that, which kind of surprised me. He told me he wasn't going back up there by himself, and he really didn't for a little bit. So I was able to get there the next week, I believe it was. And we were doing it was probably 2 weeks, and we were getting ready to, my friend and I were getting ready to go out for the morning and had our coffee, what have you. And our phones charge overnight. Now, cell service isn't the greatest up there. It's actually pretty bad. Unless you get to the top of a couple of the mountains, you can get some service, but it doesn't drain them. And I had shot my wife a text and was getting ready to leave. And next thing I know, my phone's power is at 2%. And my friend checked his, and his is the same thing. Like they're both drained, not dead, but drained. And both of them are like, what's going on with that? And I guess my desire to hunt was more than my desire to figure out what was going on with the phones. And we went our separate ways. And, when we met back up later that morning, we said, hey, what happened to your phone? And he said, well, it was a couple hours later, or an hour and a half, something like that. He said, my phone came back to full power. And mine did as well. So I've had phones since they've come out, and I've never had one do that. So especially 2 of them at the same time, I'm really not sure what would have caused that. So the year before that, so that would have been 3 years ago now, I believe. And he said, I mentioned the back door, and there's a outhouse out behind the camp. It is very dark out there, and generally you're not wandering around too far out there after dark. And so as guys, oftentimes we would just use the back door, open it up, take care of business. Well, I had done that. And I was standing there, and I'm watching these lights in the sky. It was almost like in the shape of a W, like each point on a W. And then all of a sudden they start dancing all over the sky and going at right angles and different things. And they stayed long enough for me to yell to Scott, or my friend, and he comes over and looks at it and sees them doing the same thing. And he has a military background in Fort Drum's a ways away from there. And I said, any chance the military messing around? He's like, no. So this went on probably 30 seconds maybe. And they were just, and at one point they just basically dissolved and disappeared. Now, that direction would have been to the west. There is really not a lot out there for many miles to the west. So I'm not sure what that was all about. And then last year, my friend was up there with his dog, and he had gotten a new bird dog, and he was up there by himself. And the camp is built on a side hill with a log road. And then there's this pretty significant mountain to the east, and kind of a bowl between two mountains to the west, and a creek down in the bottom, and some pines and that sort of thing. Good size. And he was up there with his dog, and in that valley below the camp, he said he heard this long, loud howl, and that's what he described it as. And he said he could hear like trees being broken, branches being broken, that sort of thing. And his dog is a hunting dog. His dog took off and went for the door for the camp and wanted inside. He said this went on for a couple minutes, and he went and grabbed a weapon of some sort and went back out. He actually called me the day that happened, and I'm like, try to record it if you can. And he called me from right up there, and he never did get it recorded. And I used to do forensic interviews with cases, so you try not to ask leading questions. And I just suggested to him, go to YouTube, play some supposed Bigfoot howls and sounds and that sort of thing, and see if you can find something that matches, or an animal sound that matches. And it was, I don't know, probably a week later, he comes back and he says that, I think it's that Ohio sound. He said it sounded just like it. So that was rather interesting to me. And that was just last year. And I went up the week after, or let's see, I got there on election day, so November 4th, and nothing, no, and I was there by myself for most of the time, and I didn't have any issues at all. So this year in June, so just a month ago, I'd gone up there. My friend was up there, and we're kind of getting the camp, some things that we wanted to do with the camp. And he had a contractor guy that had a skid steer, and we were going to fix the, if you want to call it a driveway, where it loops in front of the camp. And the way the land is, it gets kind of soggy right there in front, so hence, like the story earlier where he had gone outside, his feet would have been muddy had he been there, walked around with his socks out there. But anyway, we had this guy coming up, and it was a Friday, and he did his work with his machine, and him and his worker were going to spend the night. About 9:30, he went out to his truck to get some stuff, and he said he got a very uneasy feeling about being there, and like something was watching him, and he could actually hear some stuff stirring around. He didn't say that he saw anything, but my friend and I were talking about it after the fact, and this guy was supposed to spend Saturday night and did not. So we don't know if maybe he got a little spooked by that, because my friend did tell him about some of the strange things that happened the next day, but nobody had said anything to him about some of the strange things that happened at camp before that. So he was completely oblivious to that sort of thing. And that Saturday, I had taken the side-by-side down the road because I was going to look at a little spot where to put up a trail cam. And as we come back around to the camp, it's 2-3 miles back in there. There was a bear right there in the road, and the dog was running beside the side-by-side. So when he see us, he turned around and he stood up on his hind legs and just kind of looked at us for a few seconds. And there is no way that a bear could have reached that window. It's just not. They're just not that big. And this was probably a 200-pound bear. So, that area's certainly got some weird things happening. It seems to center primarily in October, late October. So that's the story of the camp.
Wow. How tall would you estimate that bear to be when it was on its hind legs?
He's probably 4 foot, between 4 and 4.5 feet. He wasn't right up there tall, but he was kind of on his haunches a little bit. And he wasn't moving. I had to yell at the dog, and, I finally yelled at the bear, and he finally took off. So he wasn't afraid.
Wow. So you have this area, not only potential Bigfoot activity, but some kind of either lights in the woods or UFOs in the sky, something weird like that. That is a very, very strange area. Have you looked to see if there's been reports in that area by other people of strange things? I know you said that it's in the Adirondacks somewhere.
There are a few other camps up in the area. So my friend one day, he met up with one of the other camp owners, and the other guy had a few to drink, and my friend posed that question, some weird things up here, and he just got an eye roll. So, and there's another guy that we just back in June, we I'm trying to walk him down that path to see if he would say anything, and he hasn't. He didn't, and I think he's a lifelong resident there of the closest town.
Gotcha. Has experiencing and hearing about these weird things happening around this cabin, has it affected you going up there in any way, or what's your viewpoint now going up to this area? I mean, you have to travel all the way up from the south, you said.
Yes. I think at this point I'm more curious in trying to figure out what in fact is going on. And who knows, maybe I'll never know, but more curious and just kind of looking for answers, I think. Prior to the weird stuff, and I don't know if there's any connection between the lights and what had happened to my friend, but prior to that, if you had asked me what Bigfoot was, I would have said a flesh and blood animal. And I guess I'm kind of maybe opened that door to something else now. I'm not really sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that makes you wonder, especially when you hear something like a guy that found himself outside and the door is still locked. I mean, there's not many logical, I really can't think of any logical explanations for that, man. That's just pretty weird stuff.
And he has an extensive military training where he spent time in the field. I don't want to put too much information out there, but he was highly trained, and I'll leave it at that. So for him to be a little bit rattled, it makes you wonder.
Yeah, absolutely. anyone that's been up in that area, have they started to have things happen afterwards that are unexplainable, like at home? Like all of a sudden it's like, oh, now there's weird stuff happening at our home residence?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, good.
And after he relayed that story to me, I did some quick looking online and stuff for the Adirondack Mountains, and there's nothing really specific about the woods being haunted or anything like that. So it's very dark because there's not a lot of population in that area. So, you can see the stars very well. There's not a lot of aircraft traffic. If anything, I've heard the military jets overhead and actually seen them. So they go do their things sometimes. That's during the daytime. But, it's again, that's a very remote area up in there. You could walk for miles.
It's a fascinating account, and I think even cooler is when you have accounts like this where it is continuing. I mean, you guys are going to keep going up to that area at certain times of years, and it'll be interesting to see if weird things continue to happen, or I'd love it if you were able to keep in touch if things continue to occur up there.
Absolutely. We were discussing plans for this year's season already, so.
There you go. And Dave, I want to make sure, before we close out our time, that you were able to share everything that you had wanted to share on the show today.
I believe so. Yes.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for coming forward and for sharing a few just very interesting things about an area of the country we don't hear a lot about on this show, southern Vermont and the Adirondacks. And it's thank you for coming on, and definitely keep in touch if things continue to happen up there in the Adirondacks, Dave.
I will, and thank you for having me.
Just wanted to take a minute to say thank you for listening to this episode of the Bigfoot Society podcast. Dave's stories are the kind that stay with you, not just because of what walked between the tents or what ripped open a screen 11 feet off the ground, but because of who he is, a lifelong hunter, a detective, a man who can't be rattled easily, and yet something about those mountains in Vermont and New York changed everything. If you enjoyed this conversation, please subscribe to the channel on YouTube, hit the bell icon so you don't miss any new episodes, and share this one with a friend who's in a Bigfoot, weird lights in the woods, or just a good mystery in the Northeast. If you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, make sure you're following the show. And if you can, leave a positive 5-star review. It really helps more people find us. And if you or someone you know has had a Bigfoot encounter, especially in the Northeast near the Bennington Triangle or the Adirondacks, I'd love to hear from you. So please send me an email at bigfootsociety@gmail.com and let's talk. So thanks again for listening to the Bigfoot Society. And until next time, keep your eyes open, trust your gut, and never stop asking what else might be out there, and see you in the woods.